A year later, they're living together, and she says to him, I want you to come to the mall with me this afternoon, and we're going to buy some drapes and stuff for the house. And he says, oh, sweetheart, not this afternoon. The big game's on. And she starts yelling at him. You're still watching that damn football? I hate that football. And he's standing there looking at her like, who are you? What, did aliens come in and took her and put you? And she never set out to deceive him. She never set out to lie to him or do any of that. She believed every ounce of that. It's delusional. You know, and self-delusion is psychotic wishful thinking. I hate football, but I would want to like it bad enough to believe I like it. Guys are worse. I'm telling you, the guys, I get the phone calls. I get them in the middle of the night. I get them when I get them when they're moving in and they're moving out. And I go, oh my God. There's a moment in a relationship between a guy and a gal where they've been dating for a while. There's a lot of sexual energy and they haven't consummated the deal yet sexually, but there always comes that night and you kind of know where this is the night, you know, and you kind of can sense that. And there's a time in that deal about 2 minutes out where a girl can stop a guy and say, sweetheart, before we go any further, do you really, really love me and want to spend the rest of your life with me? And the guy will go, yes, absolutely. And you can put him on a lie detector and it'll say he's telling the truth. I swear to God it will. At that moment, he's delusional. Yes. And then I get the calls. She's pulling up with a U-Haul. Well, didn't you tell her that? Well, yeah, I did. Why did I say that? One of the guys, one of my friends, he tells all these sponsees, he says, you can get laid, just don't talk to them. You're going to lie. You're going to lie to them. So just keep your mouth shut. I was in a marriage. I'll tell you something about me. I've lied a lot in my life. I've been dishonest a lot in my life, but I've never lied because I'm a liar. I've always lied because I'm afraid. I've never lied because I'm a liar. I lied because I'm scared that you won't love me as is. I don't know if I should talk about this because it's taped. I was in a relationship. I met someone a few years ago. A really nice gal. I kind of fell in love with her. And there were certain things that you need to talk about before you bring a relationship to another level. And one of them is finances. And it's an awkward thing to talk about, but it's absolutely necessary. And so I'm talking to this gal about finances. And I said, you know, have you ever had a bankruptcy? Oh, no, I've never had bankruptcy. How do you do with credit cards? Do you have credit card debt? Because she had heard me tell one of my sponsees that you don't carry credit card debt. If you have a credit card, you have an obligation to pay it off. Don't get sucked into that abyss of that high interest. Pay it off. Don't carry any credit card debt. So she says to me, oh no, I don't believe in credit card debt. I have no credit card debt. Well, it's almost true. It's only about 40 grand. And she was working on her second bankruptcy. And she couldn't tell me. And, what happens is you find out later, and you find out usually because it comes around and bites you in the ass. And it don't go away. I think alcoholics are often delusional. I think we're the kind of people that we think we could drive on a flat tire like it's going to go away or something, You know what I mean? It's that avoidance kind of thing, right? And the problem with stuff like that is if you're honest and you're forthright, okay, what you risk is maybe the person will go, oh, $40,000, I don't know, maybe we might back down on this a little bit. And that may happen. But if you're with someone who doesn't love you as is, I'm telling you, you're with the wrong person. And if you have to be something you're not in order to be in that relationship, you are in the wrong relationship. You're living a lie. And alcoholics do not do well living lies. We can't be two different people. It's a hell on earth. If there's a hell on earth, It must surely exist in the abyss between this facade I put out and the secret knowledge of who I am. I can't live like that. And the good news is if you are yourself and you put all your faults and everything out on the table, you may have the glorious experience to be loved as is. And then you will be with the right person. And if I'm with someone, I have to be something other than what I am to be with. I am not to be with that person. And some of us think so poorly of ourselves that we will be anything we have to be loved. And that's where the hurt always comes in and the harm always comes. Because the stuff doesn't go away. It always comes to the surface. And then what happens is our fears, we get to be right about our fears. When later on, all the truth comes out and then our partner feels deceived and lied to. And they realize they can't trust you. Then we're rejected. And then the thing we were afraid of in the beginning, the voice in the head goes, see, you were right. They wouldn't have loved you as is anyway. And then maybe they would have. And it's not that you're rejected because of the truth. It's you're rejected because of the lie. Right? And I reinforce the lie. And the more you feed that dog, I'm telling you, the stronger it gets. The more I act as if I am not enough, the more I reinforce the fact that I am not enough. And this is a way where we have to start uncovering, discovering, and discarding this stuff, giving it to God. God is either everything or He's nothing. The answer is trusting in God. So where was I dishonest? Where was I inconsiderate? I experience a type of inconsideration that is... It's not real, it's not typical inconsideration. It's the inconsideration of the overly self-involved. And what happens, it's not that I'm consciously being inconsiderate of you, I just can't see past me. Right? And I sit so involved in my own life and my own stuff that I don't pay attention and get what's going on with you. I'll give you an example. This is many years ago, maybe 8 years ago. I was dating a gal that was sober about 5 years. And we went to, as a couple, to the Las Vegas Roundup. Now that's a big AA convention. Probably 3,500 people. I'm a past chairman and a past advisory board member of that conference. I was on the committee for about 10 years. I've spoke there a half dozen times. It's a weekend where I get very connected to a lot of people. There's a lot of people there I know, and some of them have been milestones in my recovery, and I only see them maybe once or twice a year, and this is one of the weekends I see them. So it's a weekend where I get jazzed up because I'm going to see a lot of old friends. And I'm with my date, and we're standing in the hospitality room, and it's a room about this wide, but maybe 1.5 times longer. And on the one end, there's these double doors, and on the other end, there's double doors. So we're standing near the one set of double doors, and through the other set of double doors comes these friends of mine who I hadn't seen from Atlanta, Georgia. And one guy that's sober now, well, now he's about 47 years sober. Back then he was 30-some, I don't know, late 30s. And another guy, Harold, and a bunch of people who really had such impact on me and it helped me so much over the years. And seeing them, I was elated, and I ran down to give John a hug, and man, is it good to see you. This is great, and we're, talking and everything. Now that is my perception of what happened. My date's perception is she just left, standing there like a bump on a log, as her date runs off and leaves her alone, standing at the end of the hospitality room. I don't even know I'm doing that. Was it inconsiderate? You bet. Did I consciously try to do it? No. But I'm the guy who did it. My first sponsor told me one time, he says, you're not guilty for anything you've ever done, drunk or sober, but you are responsible. I'm the guy who did that. Did I did it intentionally? No. Did I do it? You bet. I didn't set out that morning and say to myself, there's got to be an opportunity today to make her feel like crap. I know it. If I just look... I never did that. It's not conscious. But I'm the guy who has to clean it up. I'm the guy, when I get it, go, oh my God, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that. I'm rude. This is awful. Because I'm the guy who did that. And that's all the inconsideration in my life, is that type of inconsideration. I get so wrapped up in me and my stuff that I just can't see past me to you. And so you feel slighted and left out. And it was never my intention to do that. But it is my responsibility to try to make it right. It's because no one else will. Whom had I hurt? I hurt a lot of people. My 8-step list was long, and there wasn't one person on there I ever set out consciously to hurt. But I hurt a lot of people. Did I unjustifiably arouse jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? And I think each one of those is a two-part question, because I can arouse jealousy in myself by obsessing on my insecurities until I'm the nutcase that's driving by your apartment in the middle of the night, looking in your windows, make sure no guys are there. Or I can arouse it in you. And this is a thing, I see this dynamic go on with the guys I sponsor in my home group. They get involved, some of their girlfriends, if they're wrapped up too much with the guys they're sponsored, there's certain, these gals, they start flirting in front of the guy with other guys in the group to keep them on their toes. Right? And it makes them nuts. It makes these guys crazy. And it's what they're really, they would be more honest to say, hold up a sign saying, I need attention. And instead they flirt with some other guy. And if you've ever been on the receiving side of that, it's terrible. Because it hurts. It makes you feel insecure. Right? So I can unjustifiably arouse jealousy in my partner by flirting with other people. Or if I feel insecure enough in myself, I can let you know by telling you about girls that are flirting with me, or ones that seem interested, or past girlfriends. I can tell you just enough about them to keep you on edge and keep you on your toes. Right? That's a horrible type of manipulation. So I unjustifiably arouse suspicion in myself or another person, or bitterness. I think how often alcoholics will come home from work and have a bad day at work, and people have stepped on their toes and hurt their feelings. They come home with resentments, and because of their actions and their attitudes, they'll take it out on the people that wait for them, who have never done anything. I think at times we can be the kind of people that the cat scratches us, so a day later we kick the dog. Right? And sometimes it's just in our attitude. These people over here made us uptight, so we don't suffer well, and we don't suffer alone. And so we make everybody else around us miserable. Arousing bitterness. Where was I at fault? Very important question. What should I have done instead? And I think this is the paramount question here. And the reason I believe that is that later on in the next paragraph, I'm going to ask God for something. I'm going to ask God to mold my ideals about sex. What kind of God? I want you to show me the type of person you want me to be in sexual relationships. And I want you to show me, God, the type of person that I need to be with. And if I'm going to ask God to mold my ideals, and I want to get a vision of my future sex life, I must build it on the mistakes of the past. Because if I don't learn from the past and get a vision of what I could have done instead in that situation, what is inevitably going to happen is it's going to come around again. Maybe with a different partner, but it will be similar. And if I don't learn what I could have done different, I'm going to probably do the same thing again. And I can't build a vision of my future sex life without learning from my past mistakes. We got this all down on paper and looked at it. It's not pretty. In this way, we tried to shape a sane and sound ideal for our future sex life. We subjected each relation to this test. Was it selfish or not? I can't imagine a relationship where sex is involved, where there's not some degree of self-interest or selfishness. But when my wants become more important than your needs or your emotional well-being, then I start to hurt my friends and the people around me. I start to hurt God's kids. I have to move away from a life of selfishness and self-centeredness into a consciousness of other-centeredness. I have to be the guy that maybe doesn't do it right all the time, but at least tries to think about others and their needs and what's going on with them. That is something I never did. I only really concerned with myself. We ask God to mold our ideals and help us to live up to them. We remembered always that our sex powers were God-given and therefore good, neither to be used lightly or selfishly, nor to be despised and loathed. And this is something I went through a period, I'm not proud of it, from about 10 years after my first divorce, from about 11 years sober to about 15 years sober, where I was at a very cavalier attitude about sex. And I thought as long as I was honest, it was okay no matter what happened. And the problem is people got hurt because I treated it lightly, like it didn't mean anything. And people get hurt when you treat it lightly. And people get hurt when you treat it selfishly. And when I started to get it, that people, even though I was telling them up front, I'm not really looking for a relationship right now in my life, it's too close to my divorce. People are delusional. They think, yeah, but you haven't slept with me yet. I'm going to change your mind. And then I wouldn't change my mind, and they'd get their feelings hurt. As I would if I turned it around. I was being selfish. I was using honesty like a weapon, like a type of manipulation. And I'll tell you, once I got that, I couldn't do that anymore. And how often we use sex selfishly as a type of manipulation. In my first marriage, I'm not proud of this, but sometimes when my wife wouldn't do things my way, or she wouldn't agree with me on something, she got my back until she straightened out. Now, guys can't do that as long as women. I'm telling you, we give in quick. I mean, we can only do that a couple nights, and then it's like, I don't care what it was anymore. But women do it. Women are good at that. One of the guys I sponsored he's a funny guy. And I think he exaggerates in this story a little bit, but he tells the story of when he got married. He said the whole year before they got married, they lived together. He said they slept naked every night. They had sex 2-3 times a night. It was incredible. He said within 2 months of them getting married, his wife started attaching chores to sex. And he said he came home one night and they hadn't had sex in a couple nights, and he was really ready, and he's getting all romantic and they're getting ready to get into bed, and she says, "Oh, sweetheart, I just don't feel very sexy with the grass unmowed." He tells a funny story. I think he exaggerates a little bit. He said, the next thing I know, it's 11 o'clock at night. I had a flashlight duct taped to my head trying to start the lawnmower on the front yard. But sex is a God-given thing. The book says it's good. It's not to be used lightly, and it's not to be used selfishly. And we are dissuaded. It is an expression of love and intimacy. It's never been used as it's never designed by God to be used as a form of manipulation. Whatever our ideals turns out to be, we must be willing to grow towards it. We must be willing to make amends where we have done harm, provided we do not bring about still more harm in doing so. In other words, we treat sex as we would any other problem. In meditation, we ask God what we should do about each specific matter. The right answer will come if we want it. God alone can judge our sex situation. Counsel with other persons is often desirable, but we let God be the final judge. We realize that some people are as fanatical about sex as others are loose. We avoid hysterical thinking or advice. And not only is there a lot of hysterical thinking and advice out here in the fellowship, there's often a lot of hysterical thinking and advice in here. I avoid hysterical thinking and advice. I have a sponsor I let my sponsor into my sex life. I let him into my finances. And those are the two most important areas, because those are the two areas that alcoholics of my type will reserve the right to wiggle around and maneuver. And those are the two areas I can get in the most trouble. I let my sponsor into my financial life, and I let him into my sex life. Because those are the two areas I need the most guidance with. To sum up about sex, we earnestly pray for the right ideal, for guidance in each questionable situation, for sanity, for the strength to do the right thing. If sex is very troublesome, we throw ourselves the harder into helping others. We think of their needs and work for them. This takes us out of ourselves. It quiets the imperious urge when to yield would mean heartache. I'm telling you, in my experience, there's nothing that works like that. When I am in a lot of emotional pain, I don't get through it on the profundities of the old-timers or reading spiritual literature or prayer and meditation. I'm too crazy for any of that. I get through it by throwing myself into helping others that are trying to get sober. It will do for me what I can't do for myself. When I was between 10 and 11 years sober, I went through a very painful divorce. A divorce at the time I hadn't opted for. It wasn't my idea. And I didn't know what was happening. And we'd tried some marriage counseling and we'd grown apart. And I knew that part of it was my fault, that I was just so busy for work and AA and stuff that I really had become emotionally inaccessible in the marriage. And I found out that my wife, we got a divorce, and my daughter, who was a year and a half old at the time, really the bright spot in my life, my daughter and my wife moved in with a guy that I sponsored. And he had been my best friend, a guy who I found out later had been sleeping with my wife the last year of my marriage, behind my back. And I remember times, there was a period of about 6 months before I was able to go back and go through the steps with this and get free of it. And I sponsor that guy today, and I've sponsored him for a long time. And he is one of my best friends. And my ex-wife and me are very, very close. And we are really a family, even though we don't live together. But there was a period where I was just in so much emotional pain. And I loved my daughter very, very much. And I wanted to keep her in my life. And I remember one time I spent the day with my daughter, and she was about almost maybe 2 years old at the time. And she's just a little girl, and she's been living with them as a couple now. And he's like really her live-in, day out father. And she was telling, I took her to a horse farm, and she got to ride these horses, and she always loved horses, and they were holding her on the horse and taking her around the corral, and she was really great. And my friend who ran the farm, I went to get my daughter a soda, and I'm coming back, and my friend, I could hear her say, "Hey, Katie, here comes your daddy." And Katie says, "That's not my daddy. My daddy's Craig." And it felt like somebody stuck a knife in me. And I went to take her back home that day, and I drive up to where they're living together, and I take my daughter up to the door, and I give my daughter to Craig and my ex-wife who are living together, and I watch them. She jumps into his arms, and they're like a family at the door, and I'm all alone. And I remember walking into my car and sitting in my car and sitting there and thinking, God, I can't do this. I love my daughter, but I can't do this every week. This is just too hard. God, you have me mistaken for somebody with bigger shoulders than this. And I thought, I can't continue to do this. This is too much. And I had a commitment to go pick up a guy who I just started working with. And he gets in the car. And he starts crying because he got turned down again by the courts and he can never see his kids. And I got it. And as I'm looking at him and he's crying because he can't ever see his kids and he's denied having them in his life, I realized I can do this one more week. And for moments, I got relieved of the bondage of self that I was in by being concerned with his pain. And that bought me the time that was necessary until I could come back and process that whole deal through the fourth step. And when I did that, I got free because I realized I was the guy who set that whole scenario in action, made decisions based on self, which later placed me in the position to be hurt. And I tell you, I've used that experience 100 times since then. I run into guys that are going through divorces and they feel like a victim and they don't know what happened. And I'll start to tell them what happened to me. And through my experience, they will see also the exact same thing that I saw. I was the guy who did that. Because of my own selfishness and self-centeredness, I made all of that happen. I made it all happen. If I would have sat down with a board of psychologists and sociologists at a major university, and I would have said to them at the beginning of that marriage, I would have said, look, I marry a gal who's good-hearted, and she's a great gal and basically monogamous and faithful. Can you give me a plan of action that I could put into effect over the next 4 years, 4.5 years, that would make this honest, loyal gal cheat on her husband? Could you give me something that would work? I'm telling you, they couldn't have come up with anything more effective than what I did over the next 4.5 years. I'm the guy who made all that happen. So nothing works except throwing ourselves the harder into helping others. I want to touch on a couple points in step 5. Page 72, it talks about why we have to do step 5. And a lot of people don't want to do step 5. Because you got to look stupid sometimes in front of another human being. You got to look petty and selfish, and you got to look dishonest, and you got to let somebody else see everything about you you've kept in the shade. But it says the best reason first. If we skip this vital step, we may not overcome drinking. Remember drinking? I know, it's a while back. It's hard to, sometimes you forget. You're getting so enthralled into helping others and honing ourselves into such a state of spiritual perfection. We glow in the damn dark that we forget drinking. Drinking is why I got here. I am here because I have a sickness of my heart that always returns me to drinking. So the best reason first, if we skip this vital step, we may not overcome drinking. And then it goes on to talk about, in page 74, the type of person we take this step with. And now this, you got to keep in mind, this was written in 1939. In 1939, the fellowship worldwide in Alcoholics Anonymous was less than 80 people. I know it says 100. We were 100 men and women, but it was actually, the archivists have checked, and they figure it was somewhere between 76 and 80 people. And Bill said 100 because the same reason I would have said 100. It sounds better than 89 or 81 or right. And that's not, Bill was an alcoholic. That's not dishonest. That's creative. I mean, right? I identify so much with Bill Wilson, I'll tell you. But back in that time with the fellowship, when they wrote this book, they thought that maybe somebody in Calgary, Canada, or Las Vegas, Nevada will get a copy of this book. There may not be any Alcoholics Anonymous there. And so they made some suggestions. You might want to take it with your doctor or your minister. But it made a couple criteria, which he expands upon in the 12 by 12 written in the early 50s. And he says in here that you want to take it with a closed-mouthed, understanding person. And that's very important. If I'm going to open myself up and be vulnerable, I got to be reasonably sure that this guy's not a gossip. That this guy can keep his mouth shut. And I'll tell you something there. I have no people in Alcoholics Anonymous, and they're good guys. They're good members of AA. But there's something about them that they leak like a sieve. They cannot hold a secret. And if you're like that, pick up ashtrays or something, but don't hear fifth steps. This is sacred stuff. You're given information that if used wrongly could kill someone. And I have to find a closed-mouthed person, because I want to tell you the worst things about myself. And my fear is I'll come to the big meeting Saturday night, and as I'm walking in, I'll hear a bunch of people talking about what I did and laughing about me in the back of the room, and I'm going to have to leave here or get in a fight. So I got to find a closed-mouthed person. And it says also someone who will approve of what we are driving at, and that he will not try to change our plan. In the 12 by, and there's a lot of ministers, if you take your fifth step, they'll try to change your plan, because they're not going to tell you to go into 6 and 7. They're going to tell you say 5,000 Hail Marys and 5 million Our Fathers and 70 rosaries, which is fine, but that's a kind of a change of plan. Because in the timeline in the book, it talks about doing some things immediately, right after you do this fifth step immediately. And in the 12 by 12 written years later, when the fellowship had grown, Bill says that you should take it with someone who stayed dry themselves for a period of time, who has overcome difficulties similar to your own, and it suggests that you might take it with your sponsor. It says you may find someone else inside your sponsor, but I tell you, your sponsor's a good bet. And the reason he's a good bet is he knows a lot about you to begin with. And when your sponsor knows everything about you, 2 years later after doing the fifth step, when a problem comes up, you don't have to go through your whole life history to get him to catch up. He knows exactly what's going on with you. So your sponsor's a good bet. And that brings us to page 75, which is the fifth step promises. In the middle of the page. We pocket our pride. We go to it, illuminating every twist of character, every dark cranny of the past. Once we have taken this step, and the condition is withholding nothing, we are delighted. And that might be the first promise, because some of us haven't been delighted about anything in years. We can look the world in the eye. I remember being new, I could tell you the shoes everybody wore in the meeting, because I looked down, I'm just like this. How you doing, Bob? Oh, I'm doing okay. I couldn't look people in the eye. I felt so damaged and dirty inside. We can be alone at perfect peace and ease. I couldn't be alone at perfect peace and ease before doing step 5. And I know, because I tried it. I was at a meeting one night, and I listened to this woman who had worked the steps, obviously, and was sober a long time. And she was talking about how she loves to just sit alone by herself with no stereo, no TV, and just be alone with herself. And how she likes to just commune with herself every day and just enjoys her own company. And the way she said it sounded so attractive. I thought, yeah, I'm going to do that. And I went home from the meeting. I didn't turn the stereo on. I'm going to commune with me. And you know what happens? It got quiet out here, and as it got quieter out here, it got noisier in here. And after about 30 seconds, I had to turn the TV on. I couldn't take it anymore. I could not be alone at perfect peace and ease. I can today. Not only can I must. I must have quiet time every day with just me and God every day. And then when you're connected to God, you're never really alone. Never really. Our fears fall from us. It was sometime after taking step 5 that fears that I had, I realized I didn't have anymore. And I can't tell you the moment they left. It wasn't an event. It was some sort of process that was set off by step 5. But I remember getting in my car maybe a month or 2 or so, maybe 3, after taking step 5, and I realized for the first time since I had a car, I didn't look in the back seat before I got in. I always look. I don't know what I think's lurking back there, but I always looked in the back seat. It was such a thing that it wasn't even on my 4th step. I didn't even know it was a fear until it went away. But as a result of this, we begin to feel the nearness of our Creator. One of the things that started to change in me after step 5 was I started to really get a sense that even with all the awful things that I did, that I was lovable, that God really could be there for me. And I couldn't have got that any other way except to uncover and start to clear away some of the stuff and bring it out into the light, the things that I was ashamed of. I could feel the nearness of our Creator. I may have had certain spiritual beliefs, but now we begin to have a spiritual experience. The feeling that the drink problem has disappeared will often come strongly. And it was somewhere after doing step 5 that I really got a sense that if I kept doing AA one day at a time, that I could probably stay sober the rest of my life. I think step 5, 4 and 5, and even more so in step 9 is where I really claimed my lifetime seat in Alcoholics Anonymous. I think up until that time, I was secretly afraid that this was some sort of self-help event. You know, you remember those, like Aston, that's where you go to those weekend things and it changes your life forever, which is about 3 weeks. And I thought that AA was going to be like that, you know, like this is great. But I always had suspect in the back of my mind that I was going to be back to being me again. It was just a matter of time. And on the other side of step 5 is when I really claimed my seat in Alcoholics Anonymous, where I really had a sense that this thing would work for me on a lifetime basis, one day at a time. We feel we're on a broad highway walking hand in hand with the Spirit of the universe. Well, Bill likes to be a little flowery once in a while. I mean, you know, if you're finished your 5th step and you're not skipping down the freeway with God, doesn't mean you did it wrong. I think some of us, what we feel immediately after doing step 5 is we feel tired. We feel washed out. I thought something, the chatter in my head stopped, which is a frightening thing. I saw that in it later. I saw it in a movie. I saw this guy. There was a guy that lived in New York City underneath the train, and he was used to that all kind of chaos and sirens in the trains all the time. And he went on a camping trip, and he was in a panic because everything was peaceful. And that was kind of the way I was after step 5. I had this feeling like, God, there's something wrong here. I don't know what it is. But what it was is that all this stuff was just kind of went like this. And the worldly clamors, as Bill called it, were put to rest, to return later. That's why we have step 8. That's why we have step 10 and 11. They come back like a bad tumor. And then I'm going to quit with this next paragraph, and we'll take a break, because we're supposed to break at 5:30. This next paragraph is very important. It's the bridge between step 5 and step 6 and 7. And if you'll notice something, there's been a timeline from step 3. We did step 4 at once. We did step 5 as soon as we could find somebody. The book is encouraging you. Just keep going. Right now. Keep going. Moving forward. And it says here, this is immediately after doing step 5, it says, returning home, we find a place where we can be quiet for an hour. So they give you an hour. An hour is actually a long time to be quiet. Carefully reviewing what we have done. So I'm going to look back over my 4th step. I thank God from the bottom of my heart that I know Him better. And that's a prayer that I encourage the guys I sponsor to say. And I tell them, I said, I think you should say it. Even if you don't feel like you know Him better, you're taking a leap of faith. We are trusting that we have just cleared some stuff between you and God out of the way. And you're going to thank Him for the opportunity. So thank Him from the bottom of your heart that you know Him better. Taking this book down from the shelf, we turn to the page which contains the 12 steps. Carefully reading the first 5 proposals, the first 5 steps. So I'm really, in this hour, taking an inventory of the first 5 steps and everything I've done in step 4 and 5. We ask, which is a prayer, we ask God if we have omitted anything, for we are building an arch through which we shall walk a free man at last. Is our work solid so far? Are the stones properly in place? Have we skimped on the cement put into the foundation? Have we tried to make mortar without sand? Many times I've done this. I've sent a guy home to do what it talks about on page 75 and then ultimately 76. And 45 minutes later, I'll get a phone call. And the guy will say, Bob, yep, I forgot to tell you something. Okay? Because often when I get alone with God and I'm reviewing what I did, there'll be something that popped up that I didn't consciously sweep under the rug, but I swept it under the rug just the same. Maybe out of fear, maybe out of just forgetfulness, I don't know. But often guys will call me 45 minutes later and say, Bob, I forgot to tell you I stole a little money at work. Oh, okay. How much? Oh, $450,000. Forgot that, did you? Or, Bob, I forgot to tell you about the sheep. Okay. Not unusual. Not unusual. There's something that happens often with us and God. God's very gracious. If I am committed to my spiritual growth, and I'm committed to sobriety and recovery from alcoholism, God will provide everything I need. And even if I try to avoid things, He will continually put